SABC News reporter Sentleeng Lehihi is there for us now. Sentleeng, hi. Thanks indeed for your time. What are we expecting to take place there this morning?
Good morning to you, Griselda, and our viewers. We're here in Klerksdorp in Northwest, a province that has been deemed the Moses Kotane province by the South African Communist Party. We've seen quite a number of delegates make it through here to the Matlosana municipality, where we're expecting that the council will sit and deliberate in preparations for the National Congress that will be taking place later this week. We understand that among the deliberations there will be talks about, the future of the SACP in terms of, it participating in elections as an independent party and not necessarily as part of the tripartite alliance with the ANC and COSATU. We understand that even as well they will talk about their stance as a province regarding the leadership that we're seeing, the contestation at national level. But just to get a bit of a clearer picture about what the deliberations are going to be dealing with, we're joined by the Provincial Secretary Madoda Sambatha. Dr. Madoda, thank you so much for your time. You are here deliberating as the Moses Kotane province in preparation for the National Congress this week. What are you to talk about?
Thank you very much, Sintle. As the SACP in Moses Kotane, which is Northwest, we are convening a Provincial Council in preparation for the National Congress. One of the reasons why you must have a Provincial Council is because the number of delegation to the National Congress is reduced for all provinces, owing to non-availability of resources. Therefore, a council, it's a platform for those that may not be delegates to the National Congress to have a first-hand interaction with documents and reports that are going through the National Congress. Our National Congress is convened as the 15th National Congress, of course, constitutionally from the 16th. And this one is convened at a most critical time in South Africa, just after the eve of disruption by COVID in terms of the economy, at the time where we have the highest unemployment rate as ever, at the time where unemployment amongst young people is very high, but also at the time where we are on the crossroads as to whether the capitalist system still has to be sustained. And if it has to be sustained, as to what are the reasons that you would still sustain a capitalist system in a country that has huge growing inequalities on the basis of non-acceptability of capitalism, on development of the people and inclusivity of the economy. So this Congress is going to have many questions to ask and answer. But one of them is also the fact that at this stage in our country, trade union membership is declining. 76% of employed workers are not unionized. Only 24% of employed workers are unionized. A communist party has to take stock of that.
Most certainly, and I think that this area of Matlosana is a clear depiction of these inequalities that we're seeing. It used to be a hub of mining, but driving into here, you see just shacks and just utter poverty. I mean, these are definite points that you're going to be taking forward, coming from a province that used to, have great mining, but it seems to be declining.
Well, Sintle, our position as the SACP, Moses Kotane, on mining. We have always stood by the fact that though mining has been nationalized through MPRDA, when MPRDA says mineral wealth beneath the soil is a common heritage of all South Africans, and the state is the custodian thereof. But we've been asking question that if you were to take mining operations and their contributions to local economy and their contributions to labor-sending areas, it is not a contribution that is convincing to South Africans and those that have mines next to them. And therefore, the question of nationalization of mines to us still resembles an issue that we should move beyond that which is stipulated in the MPRDA. Take, for instance, De Beers. De Beers exist in South Africa. It exists in Botswana. It exists in Namibia. In Botswana, it is Botswana because government owns 51%, De Beers owns 49%. They even have an arrangement of rotational appointment of the CEO, the government and private sector. It is the same thing in Namibia, NAMDEF. If De Beers can accept to be jointly owning with the government of Botswana on a 51 and 49%, what makes it different for South African government to, at least without pressure of nationalization, explore possibilities of state ownership? Yes, we know there's a state mining company, but its contribution and operations in the state, in the mining industry, is minimal to be seen to have an impact to generate income for the state. But the second issue is the ANC conference resolved on a state bank, which state bank is apparently openly rejected by the Ministry of Finance and Treasury. We will still argue as the SACP that that resolution is correct of creating a state bank, and that the necessity for the state bank is also on the basis of the attitude and refusal to transform by the current banking system that we have in the country.
But Baba Madoda, some of these things that we are talking about, the ambitions of the SACP, are they not overly too ambitious? As you said, the pushback from capitalist interests have created a situation where we cannot see, some capitalist ideals come to pass, particularly even thinking about the prominence or the ability of SACP to run alone in the next coming elections.
Since it's not too ambitious. It's things that would make sense even to an ordinary person. Take what Chris says. Chrisan is asked, what would you say is socialism? He says, no, socialism is delivering water to those that have no access to water. South Africans' access to water, it's varying. And he says it's delivering houses to those that don't have access to houses. South Africans' access to housing, it's varying. He says it's health to those that are sick. Access to health and the dominance of the private sector in health, it's a problem. So all the things that the Communist Party stands for resembles with the poor. Remember, we should never gauge the success of our revolution about how many of us from the liberation movement has access to resources to a level of being middle class and capitalist and upper class. It should be assessed on the basis of how our revolution resolved the challenges of the working class and the poor as they vote for us, and as the African National Congress particularly. They vote for their liberation in the economic and socio-economic interest. They are not just voting for the love of the ANC. They vote for the ANC for the ANC to deliver a program that changes their lives. This is what the Communist Party stands for. We stand for decommodification of basic services. We stand for detenderization of the state, and that we should have a state that delivers without that state expecting to be tendering. We can't keep quiet when ESCOM, a state-owned entity, is drained down deliberately as a basis to then make it unable and incapacitated to a level where privatization of electricity service is going to be an option. As we speak now, take Algeria. Algeria do have independent power producers, but government of Algeria owns 25% of them. In South Africa, IPPs are privately owned, yet ESCOM gets dictated to what amount to pay for electricity that comes from IPPs. As we go to a Congress of the SABC, we will say nobody must scavenge on the dead carcass of Eskom. Nobody must ever plan to then privatize Eskom. Just last week, the same member of the board that South Africans were hailing insult on Mkhuleko Hlengwa when on that meeting, the same board member says now there's no option except privatizing Eskom. We are saying as the working class, no to privatization of state-owned entities. They must be recapitalized, refocused, meant to then help us fight the high level of unemployment that we have amongst young people, help us intervene on skills shortage that South Africa has. Otherwise, we are going there for an anti-capitalist and pro-working class and the poor program that the 15th Congress of the SACP must come up with. Leadership elected must be ready to implement that program.
And sentiments here in our council, what do we see as, our delegates' wish in terms of the incoming leadership at national?
Well, the issue of the leadership, the only thing we know for now until we go to council, is that the General Secretary said in Congress he's not available as a General Secretary. But he did not say he's not available for all positions. So that's the only position we know. The General Secretary is not available as General Secretary. So we are also speaking as Provincial Secretaries. Our last meeting was yesterday where we say, let's not create an impression that there's chaos. But as we deliberate on the next leadership that must take over in the Communist Party, it must be a leadership that is prepared to stand up for and with South Africans. South Africans cannot be frustrated alone without leadership. That's where we are.
Thank you very much for your time, Tate Madoda. South Africans cannot be left alone without leadership. The words of the Provincial Secretary of the SACP. We've got the political lecture about where the SACP stands, its ideals, and its prioritization of service delivery to the people of South Africa. From us here in Klerksdorp, back to you in studio.
Sentleeng, thank you very much indeed. We'll cross to you again.